You've seen the videos, right? An encounter with the police that seems to start out okay, but then just spirals into chaos. It's a scene we see online all the time, and it can be really confusing. Today, we're going to deconstruct why those viral arrests so often look the way they do by digging into two completely different and conflicting sets of rules for how the world is supposed to work. And it so often comes down to this exact face, that look of just pure jaw on the floor shock right when the handcuffs click. It's more than just surprise. It's a look of total bewilderment, like the fundamental rules of reality just got rewritten on them. So what is going on there? Well, the answer starts with a really powerful and usually unspoken belief. It's a concept that the source for this explainer calls the consent illusion. And it's basically the default setting for many of us. It's the belief that, social interactions are a two-way street, that there are mutual agreements where you can always negotiate, and where saying no is a valid move that has to be respected by the other person. And look, this worldview doesn't come from nowhere. It's actually a product of the environments a lot of us live and work in. Think about universities, offices, or quiet suburbs. In those places, the rules really are based on etiquette and voluntary cooperation. No is a perfectly reasonable response that usually ends the conversation. The trouble starts when that world, with its rules, smashes right into another one. And this is where it all goes down. This is the moment of impact, when the person operating under the consent illusion meets a system with a completely different and non-negotiable set of rules. It's a collision of expectations, and it's really the root of all that confusion we see playing out in those videos. So let's just lay these two competing realities out, side by side. On one hand, you've got the consent illusion. We can call those your rules. The interaction is a discussion, no is a valid option, negotiation is always on the table. But then you have their rules, the officer's rules, which are built on something called the escalation ladder. For them, compliance isn't optional, it's required. The interaction isn't a discussion, it's a procedure. And no isn't a negotiation tactic, it's a trigger to start climbing that ladder. So let's define that term, the escalation ladder. You can think of it as an internal flowchart that every officer has in their head. It's a procedure for gaining compliance. It's not something they hand you in a pamphlet, but it dictates their response. And pretty much every action you take determines whether they stay put or move up to the next rung. Okay, so how does this climb actually work? It isn't always some big dramatic moment. It's usually a series of small but really significant steps up a ladder of increasing force. And get this, you can be moved right up that ladder without ever getting physical. Things we might see as just arguing, like loud and aggressive body language or openly defying a command, those are big red flags in their world. Even things like being obviously intoxicated or, according to the source, wearing certain clothes or having certain tattoos can be seen as indicators of noncompliance. Each one is a little tick on an internal meter, moving them closer to that next rung. And here are the rungs themselves. Step 1 is simple. Verbal commands. Sir, I need you to step out of the car. If that fails, it moves to step 2. Physical control. Hands-on contact to guide or move you. Next up is step 3, restraint, which usually means handcuffs. If there's still resistance, it climbs to step 4, tools, like a taser or pepper spray. And the final rung, of course, is lethal force. Each step up is considered a direct and necessary response to the failure of the one before.
So you might be wondering, why is it so hard to go back down the ladder? This quote from the source material really gets to the heart of it. Once an officer starts climbing, backing down becomes institutionally really difficult. There's more paperwork, their reputation is on the line, and from their perspective, the threat to their safety has increased. There's this powerful momentum that keeps things moving in one direction only.
Now, the author of our source takes this whole framework and zooms out, proposing a much broader and pretty provocative theory about how these systems play out across society. And I want to be really clear here. What follows is the author's specific argument that he's putting forward. His argument is that for certain populations, ones he describes as being managed by the state, the goal is actually not reform or rehabilitation, it's containment. In this view, the strategy is to effectively quarantine social problems, to just contain the chaos, not to cure it, and to only step in with force when that chaos threatens to spill over. And the author's theory continues from there, claiming this leads to a kind of cultural double standard. He identifies a class of observers, who he calls paternalist humanists, who in his view interpret the same behaviors in very different ways depending on who's doing them. For example, he suggests that defiance of a lawful order from someone in what he calls a managed population might be explained away as an authentic expression, or that an anti-authority stance is seen as a tragic but inevitable part of their condition. Again, this is his analysis of the cultural dynamics he sees at play. All right, so let's bring all this back to the here and now. Why does understanding these two clashing systems, the consent illusion and the escalation ladder, matter so much today in our world of smartphones and constant social media? It matters because today, every single one of these encounters is basically a performance for two completely different audiences online. The footage of somebody clearly operating under the consent illusion goes viral, and for one group, it confirms their entire narrative about injustice and abuse of power. But for another audience, that exact same video confirms their narrative about the need for decisive action and escalation. Both sides watch the same clip and see absolute proof that they're right. So when you strip away all the commentary, all the different realities, what are you left with? You're left with a very simple number. In any of these encounters, this is the number of people who actually have the escalation ladder and all the institutional power that comes with it on their side. Which brings us to the final crucial question. When two sides are playing what they think are two totally different games, with two totally different sets of rules, who ultimately has the power to just flip the whole table over? Understanding the answer to that is the key to understanding that look of pure shock. The exact moment a person realizes what game they were really playing all along